Boop. Boop. It's your first boop of the new year. Boop. Good girl. Okay, so I am actually recording this on New Year's Day, on January 1st. Hence why I have my Ace shirt on, because it's his birthday. So, fun there. Well, fun for Ace for certain things. But yeah. This is actually the first video I'm recording of the year anyway. It'll be like the second one I think that'll go up, because I have one of the movie reviews that is like backlogged from a while ago that just hasn't gone up yet because I've had other things to post. But this will be the start of my video series, part like a little side series, mini-series, long mini-series, in the rulers and leaders videos that I was doing, and I'm still working on Wano, so at the moment I am going to be starting the Scabbards, or the 9 red Scabbards, or the Akazaya 9, as they are referred to as. And in that regard, we start with the leader of the 9 red Scabbards. We start with Kinemon, or Foxfire Kinemon, as he is also referred to as, for his nickname, or his epitaph. Kinemon's video is going to be, life is going to be broken down into at least 3, possibly 4 parts. The third and fourth ones might be getting divided into, the third one might be getting divided in half, depending on how long certain parts of that video take me. Because as the audience, as the reader, and as the watcher, we spend so much time with Kinemon because we meet him way back at Punk Hazard, and then we know him through Punk Hazard, Dressrosa, Zoe. We technically know him through Whole Cake, but he's not involved in Whole Cake. And then we get into Wano, and Wano is just such a beast of an arc in and of itself, along with everything that happens in Wano leading up to the raid on Onigashima. Then we get the Odin flashback, then we get the actual raid on Onigashima, and everything that happens there, and then everything that happens post that. So, in that regard, we see so much with Kinemon because he's very involved in all of this stuff. It's like same thing if I did like a video about Law. There's so much stuff that happens with Law because he's involved in so much. I had to break up Doflamingo into several videos, and I had to do the same thing with Big Mom, and I'm going to have to do the same thing here with Kinemon. Just because if I don't, these are going to be exceedingly long. This is going to be a super long video, and I don't want to record that or edit it all in one go. So, we will be starting with kind of his early life. So, his birth all the way up through basically when he leaves Wano after the 20-year time jump. That's what we are going to go over today. But first, we have some other basic information about Kinemon. Obviously, as I said, his epitaph is Foxfire Kinemon. He is, of course, a samurai from the region of Kuri in Wano. He is a retainer of the Kozuki family, originally sworn to Kozuki Odin, and now sworn to Kozuki Momonosuke, who is the new shogun of Wano. He is also the leader of the 9 red Scabbards, or the Akazaya 9, and he is, of course, the husband of Tsuru. She may just get a video of her own because she's badass and I love her. So she might get a video of her own after I finish up with the 9 red Scabbards. Also, Izo is going to get included in the Scabbards, as is Shinobu, because for all intents and purposes, they should be Scabbards. They have proven themselves. And Izo was originally sworn to Odin anyway, so that just sticks there. So they'll be in this lineup as well. And I've already talked about Inarashi and Nekomamushi, so there's not really much there that I need to add. And then, I talked about Kanjuro when I was discussing Orochi, for the Kozuki family, or the Kurozumi family, excuse me. So there's all of that. So, Kinemon. Kinemon is, physically, he's 36 years old. Chronologically, he's 56 years old because, of course, he, along with, Momonosuke, Kinemon, Raizo, and Kiku, were all sent 20 years into the future by Toki using her time fruit, which will be kind of gone over in this video, obviously more toward the end. So he is, chronologically 56 years old, physically 36 years old. And he acts like an idiot. So, well, not an idiot, because there are times where Kinemon is very smart, and he obviously cares quite a lot about the people who are around him and the people who have earned his trust. We see that when it comes to the Kozuki family itself, with Odin and Momonosuke and Hiyori, and even with Toki. And, of course, we see that when it comes to the other Scabbards. We see how torn up he was when Kanjuro did the big reveal that he was, the traitor and everything, which I'll discuss later. We see, and even, for Kinemon, we see how much he ends up caring about the Straw Hats and even, the Heart Pirates because of Law. With, getting to know them throughout Punk Hazard and Dressrosa, and then in Zou, and then, through everything that happens in the Wano arc. We see how much he does care about them, and of course he loves Suru and everything, so there's lots of that. In regards to his devil fruit, he has the Fuku no Mi, or the Garb fruit, or as he refers to it, his Garb Jutsu, or his clothing jutsu. Because, of course, Kinemon is, of course, from Wano, and in Wano, they don't really know that much about devil fruits, even though Shinobu has a devil fruit, Kinemon has a devil fruit, Kanjuro has a devil fruit, Toki had a devil fruit. We see that and everything, but back then they didn't really know that much about devil fruits because they were very isolated and everything. So they just thought it was a type of weird jutsu that they were now capable of. Raizo has a devil fruit. So we see that, and he just calls it clothing jutsu. Basically, the powers that he has with his devil fruit allow him to be able to transform any object that is placed on a person's head and transform it into clothing of some kind, whatever type of clothing he can picture. We see him do this in Punk Hazard when he gives Nami and the other Straw Hats that are part of her group, along with all of the kids that they are trying to save from trying to save in Punk Hazard, where he activates his power to give them all nice warm winter coats and gloves and everything. And then of course we see him use it again later in Dressrosa when he makes disguises for himself and the infiltration group that make their way into Dressrosa. And then of course he does it several more times, and then we see him use it again in Wano when they he has his bargain sale. I don't remember what the name of the technique is that he uses, where if you just run through the hoop or the little bridge thing that he sets up, the doorway where you run through it. Now they all look like they're wearing Beast Pirate attire for all of the invasion forces, the rebellion, and the Straw Hats and the kid pirates and everything that are there when he uses that ability there. These clothes can stay, and they seem to be fairly durable, all the way up until you take the item off, and then they are gone forever. So we see this when, this is kind of best shown when, in Punk Hazard, when Sanji and Nami's body has to dive into the lake in the middle of the island to be able to get Kinemon's torso out of the lake, where it's being bitten by a shark. Where it's being eaten by a shark, and Sanji has to strip off Nami's coat and everything so he can dive into the water, and he's not going to be weighed down by wet fabric. So he has to strip all that off, and he strips off the gloves and the coat, and they just pop out of existence. And then Kinemon makes him a new one shortly thereafter by just putting a stick or a leaf or something on top of his head, or a rock or something. He's able to then transform that. How he found out he had that ability in the first place, I have no idea. I think Kinemon just says at some point in time he ate a weird fruit and then he gained this ability. So that's what it is. And it's, in regards to battle, it's not a very useful type of devil fruit to have, but that's not the way that Kinemon fights. He doesn't rely on his devil fruit to fight. He has his swords, because he is, Foxfire Kinemon, and he has his, sword, his fire cutting ability and everything that he has that Zoro then kind of steals down the line and is able to use as well. Kinemon practices two sword style, and his two swords are Sukasan and Kaku-san. I forgot to look up the translations for it, but Kaku just makes me laugh because Kaku-san just makes me laugh because it just reminds me of Kaku in One Piece, which is fair. But he has 2 swords, and he's had these swords for a very long time. And he has, learned how to master the 2-sword style that he fights with, along with his, foxfire style and everything. Kinemon has observation and armament haki. Pretty much all of the samurai in Wano probably do. In all honesty, pretty much all of the Scabbards do, I think, have armament and observation haki. Well, okay, that's not entirely true because, if I remember correctly, for Inarashi and Nekomamushi, Inarashi has, observation haki, but not armament haki, and Nekomamushi is the opposite, where he has armament haki, but not observation haki. And I don't remember why, and it was just something to do with the fact that they're a cat and a dog, so they're opposites. But yes, Kinemon has his 2 swords that we see him use throughout the course of throughout his time in the story. And then moving into talking about Kinemon's actual life. So we get, of course, more introduced to Kinemon's past when we have the Odin flashback. So that's a bunch there. So Kinemon was born in the Kuri region in Wano. Excuse me, was it the Kuri region or the Kuni region? Yeah, he was born in the Kuri region. Kibi region was the other one I was thinking of, but he was born in the Kuri region in Wano, 56 years ago. And in his youth, he became an infamous thug who was addicted to gambling. So we just see him... Kinemon gets himself into trouble because he ends up... stuff ends up happening in his youth where he just ends up getting in trouble a lot. He becomes addicted to gambling and everything. And the first time that we see him in the flashback is like 41 years ago, I believe. If I remember correctly. It's like 41 years ago when we start the Odin flashback. We're introduced to Kinemon. And we are also introduced to Suru at the same time. Surujo at the same time. And she is, of course, later on would become his wife, but in the beginning she is his best friend, his childhood best friend. And he often tried to take money from her to pay off his gambling debts. So, yeah. On one of these occasions, when he shows up at the tea house where she works, he sneaks inside and he's trying to steal money from her. And she catches him and pins him to the ground with a knife right next to his head. And I love Suru for this. Love Otsuru for this. And she's just like, yeah, no, you're not taking my money. I love how she can put him in his place so easily. Kinemon has the spike mentality from Cowboy Bebop of, I love a woman who can kick my ass. He has that mentality, and Suru can kick his ass. And, while he was there, he had overheard her talking to these other thugs that were there and talking about the white boar and how if you're able to bring its cub to one of the Yakuza bosses in town, they will give you a piece of platinum, which was supposed to be worth so much money. Because platinum was more valuable than gold, and gold is, of course, more valuable than silver, and, of course, that's kind of how, the Wano, the Wano economy was run. That's their currency was gold. It also used to be called the country of gold. But what ends up happening is he overhears them talking about the boar and how they managed to capture it. So he's like, oh, if I get this boar and I take it to the guy who's the rival of... to Kurokoma, who's the rival of Hirogoro, I can get my money and then I can pay off Hirogoro, so I'll be fine. And Kinemon comes up with the bright idea of stealing the baby, stealing the boar, and running away, running to the flower capital with it, which is ridiculous. He was in debt to Hirogoro's family, and he, stole money from them. Which, why? Why would you steal money from Hirogoro? He looks threatening. He's also a nice guy, but he looks very scary, so I would not steal money from him. To be fair, I don't plan on stealing money from anybody, but that's just the way I work. And he decides to, he steals the boar and he runs into the flower capital. Once in the flower capital, he runs into Denjiro. And of course, they know each other already, and he shows them the white boar. And then Denjiro explains, like, oh my god, you have the child of the mountain god. That is a bad thing. You should not have brought it to the city. Once its parents realize that it's missing, its parent is going to come rushing down from the mountains and is going to come charging straight through the capital to find its baby, and it's going to destroy everything in its path to get here. And lo and behold, they are correct. Lo and behold, Denjiro is correct. And Denjiro ends up, what ends up happening is Kinemon had led the mountain god into the capital, which is what Kurokoma had wanted in the first place. He wanted to destroy Hirogoro, and if the flower capital had to suffer, but he didn't care. So, the boar is now, the mountain god, the giant boar, is now causing havoc in the flower capital. Kinemon realizes what happened because he finds out that the boar had also gobbled up all the people who had been at the tea house, which of course includes Otsuru, and of course he's in love with Otsuru. So what ends up happening is he tries to face down the boar, but first they have their meeting with Kozuki Oden. Kozuki Oden overhears them talking and realizes what they did. He grabs the white boar and tries to use it to get the parrot boar to calm down. Kinemon also refused to hand the boar over in the first place, and then he tries to stop the boar the parent boar once he realizes what happened, that it devoured Otsuru and everything, and he tries to stand up to the boar. He just gets attacked and knocked to the side very easily by the boar. Just very overpowered. Oden then picks up the boar and uses it to, lure the mountain god away, and destroys, defeats the mountain god, and releases, via his cutting ability, is able to spare the lives of everyone inside of the mountain god and mean that they are now okay. This, of course, means that Tsuru is fine along with everybody else that the mountain god ate. And, of course, Kinemon is just so overwhelmed with gratitude and just impressed beyond all belief. He's just so happy that Tsuru is okay. And this is kind of the moment that results in, Kinemon wanting to turn his life around. He doesn't want to be a gambler anymore. He doesn't want to be this gambling addict anymore. He doesn't want to owe money anymore. He doesn't want to do this stuff anymore. He wants to prove himself because he wants to become a type of man that he views as being worthy of Otsuru. So that way he can be with her. And so that's his intention, and he follows through with it. He then goes and follows Oden out of the city when he is exiled. Him and Denjiro follow him, and in the process, they swear themselves to being his followers, much to Oden's chagrin, because he's just like, I don't want this. Why are you following me? And they're like, we're your acolytes, we're your followers and everything. He's just like, please leave me alone. So this is what ends up happening. And from there, what we end up having happen is they then, they travel with Oden, and eventually they end up in the Hakumai region, where they end up staying with Yasuie for a little while, and then they get kicked out of there, or they leave or whatever. And then they begin to travel around through all of the different regions. They travel through the Ringo region, where they come, they travel through all the different regions, and eventually, of course, during all this time frame, Kiku and Izo become part of their group, along with Raizo, along with Kanjuro, all become part of the group. And eventually they end up in the Kuri region, and Oden goes and fights Ashura Doji, and then becomes kind of the new leader of the Kuri region. And then eventually, the rest of the Scabbards, follow him there and everything. Well, they chase after him, thinking that he's going to get himself hurt, which he does. He gets shot a bit, but he's fine. He gets hit with a couple of arrows, but he's fine. And he, defeats Ashura Doji and then becomes the leader of the Kuri region. And then eventually Odin is named the daimyo of the Kuri region, and this leads Kinemon, along with the others, to becoming one of his retainers. And of course now Ashura Doji has been added to the group. From there, we eventually have it that Inarashi, Nekomamushi, and Kawamatsu join Odin's group. And, what ends up happening is this where it leads into one of the very defining moments for, not just Kinemon, but a lot of the Scabbards in general. Because this is where the Scabbards are like, okay, well, we're running low on money because, Odin keeps giving money to Orochi because he feels sorry for him and reasons and whatever. And so the Scabbards, minus Kiku, all sneak their way into the Hakumai region and sneak their way to Yasuie's home, manor, house, castle, whatever it is. Sneak his way there. They sneak their way there. And they try to steal money from Yasuie. And Yasuie, being the very wise man that he is, they're caught, and then he scolds them, and this is where we have the scene where all of the Scabbards are, tied up and everything. Scabbards minus Kiku, because even Yasuie is like, yeah, it's probably a good thing you to bring Kiku with you. She's too young to be be incriminated in this. But here's what I'm gonna do. Yasuie, of course, does the whole thing very magnanimous thing where he gives them the money they were trying to steal and more, and he looks at them and he's like, you are swearing yourselves to be the followers of Odin, who is now the daimyo of Kuri and is the future shogun of Wano. He is the only son of our shogun, therefore he is the next shogun. And all of your actions now reflect back on him. Reflect back on Odin. And if you want to try to prove yourselves to be retainers that are worthy of following him, you must educate yourselves and train to become dignified warriors, to become dignified ones who can represent Odin among the citizens of Wano. And he does this. And this is, and I went over this with Yasuie, this is a very big moment in the lives of the Scabbards. And they take it to heart. They all, they take the money, they buy books, they buy everything else. One of the things that we noticed with Kinemon is that when he's younger, he has blonde hair, which kind of goes with his name because Keen is gold in Japanese. And so, his hair was blonde. It's also this kind of joke in Japanese where it's just like, oh, someone who has blonde hair. Like, they'll have, sometimes the girl in an anime will have blonde hair and she's kind of more like the rebellious one or whatever, as opposed to, the more typical, darker haired girls, the girls with black hair and dark brown hair and stuff like that, the more well-behaved ones. So that's just kind of like it's kind of a rebellious thing. And Kinemon had blonde hair when he was younger, and then now, once we get as they're going through all of their training and learning and education and everything, Kinemon makes his hair black. So assumedly he dyes his hair, which is something that we never see him having to do later on in the manga or in the anime. He's never shown dyeing his hair, but that's just something that supposedly happens. To be fair, we see other people throughout Wano who have different hairstyles. Like Kanjuro has red hair, and of course, Orochi and Tama and such have purple hair. And we see, Toko has pink hair, and of course, the Kozukis, all of that, or the Kozuki, excuse me. Yes, the Kozukis all have kind of greenish hair. Even Momo's is kind of very light, very light green, and then once it grows out and everything, once he's older, he has, much darker hair, but it still has a bit of that green highlight to it. So it's just odd color hair aren't necessarily unheard of in Wano, because there's other blonde characters that we see. I think we see a couple of the geishas and stuff like that later on that have blonde hair. And I think there's a member of the Mimawari Gumi, I think, that have, or it's Yanni Wabanshi, one of the two, that has, I think, blonde hair. There are some other ones that we see. So it's like blonde hair is not unheard of in Wano. It's just having Kinemon have it when he's younger than he has black hair when he's older just implies that he dyes his hair. Which I don't know if Oda ever confirmed, but I would assume that that would be the case. And like we see it where they grow and they educate themselves and they learn and they become these dignified warriors. They become these dignified representatives of Odin. Much to Odin's chagrin, but they are doing it because they want to represent Odin better. And then we get to 30 years ago, which is when Odin then goes and visits the flower capital and all of the Scabbards accompany him so he can go and see Sukeyake. And of course this includes Kinemon. And Kinemon is, as I said, he's the leader of the Scabbards. The leader of the retainers. From there, very shortly after that meeting, is when the Whitebeard pirates show up. When they, get washed ashore on the Curry Beach. And Odin goes and he meets Whitebeard. Tries to fight Whitebeard, asks Whitebeard to take him with him. Whitebeard says no, and then Whitebeard and Kinemon end up having a good friendship because Kinemon's like, please don't take our guy, he's kind of the prince of the kingdom. Whitebeard, I'm not gonna. Odin and Whitebeard, good job. So it's just like, they get along fine. Why Odin's like, or Kinemon's like, please don't take Odin, and Whitebeard's like, I don't want to. So we have that. Unfortunately, when Whitebeard is leaving, Odin, Izo, Itarashi, and Nekomamushi, of course, all go missing because, of course, they end up going with him. Because, of course, Odin runs away, Izo's chasing after him, and then Itarashi and Nekomamushi are, of course, they stow away on the ship. So that's what happens. And then, of course, Kinemon is the one who is now left in charge because now Odin's gone, and 3 of the retainers are gone. So now it's, now Kinemon is the one who's kind of in charge while Odin is missing. While Odin is, outside the country. And Kinemon, from everything that we can see, takes this job very, very seriously. He understands that he has to be the one who is now in charge and help with protecting the people of Curry. Because this is the region where he grew up, and he very much cares about the region and everything. And at some point in all of this timeline, him and Suru did end up getting married. We never get a confirmation of when that is, but we know that they do, because they are specifically stated to be husband and wife. So we know at some point in time they've gotten married. Don't know when. We'll find out eventually, I would assume. Or maybe we'll find out, I don't know. But at some point in time, Kinemon and Suru got married, and then, of course, Kinemon is now, of course, the one who is now, by default, in charge of the Curry region. And he takes that job very seriously. He's kind of like the de facto, daimyo at that point in time, since Odin is not there. And then, of course, Sukeyake is sick, so they don't really want to bother him and everything. And, of course, Orochi's pulling his coup in the background. And while all of this is happening, Odin's out having all of his adventures outside of Wano and everything, Kinemon is the one who is keeping Curry running. And then, of course, when Odin returns, he has, makes a pit stop there with the Roger Pirates and, drops off Toki along with Momonosuke and Hiyori, and is just like, hi, yeah, I'm back. I'm here to just drop off a few things and pick up one thing. One of those things, the dropping off thing is, I have a wife. Her name is Toki. These are our children, Momonosuke and Hiyori. Take care of them. I'm going to make a quick pit stop in the flower capital. I gotta go read a poneglyph, and then I'm gonna go get back on the ship, and I'm gonna leave the country again for I don't know how long, so take care of them. And that's basically what Kinemon is left with. He is, Toki is brought there along with Momonosuke and Hiyori, and he has nothing against them. Kinemon has never been shown to have anything against Toki or the children. Not by any means. He does not blame them for anything that happens. He blames Odin entirely. Particularly once he, finds out more about, the fact that Odin's stowed away and everything. And Itarashi and Nekomamushi are now, of course, returned as well. And, of course, Izo stayed with Whitebeard. So Inarashi and Nekomamushi are probably catching Kinemon up at this point in time into what's been going on, and Toki kind of helps as well, and everything else with that. So Kinemon and the others are basically filled in on what's been going on while Oden has been out of the country, what Oden has been doing, and then they get filled in by Kinemon on what's been going on in the Wano. And at this point in time, Sukiyaki is dead, and now Orochi is, Shogun, has, pulled a coup and all of that stuff. And by then, of course, the Beast Pirates are there as well, because we know that the factories have already been being set up, and that Kaido is already in the process of, slowly, building up the weapons factories, and then is soon going to be starting on his, on Onigashima, on the construction project there for building his castle. For building his mansion on Onigashima, which, to be fair, I do love the design and everything that went into to Kaido's mansion in Onigashima. I love it. I think it's great. I don't personally want to live in a giant skull, but sure, Kaido did a great job with designing that place. Moving on. What happens from there is, of course, about 6 months later is when Oden finally does finish his voyage with the Roger Pirates, and he comes back to Wano. Kinemon and the others just end up freaking scolding him and everything, and like chewing him out for everything, and pointing out the fact of like, all the time you were gone, all of the citizens were not happy with you. And then Toki shows up. And, and then we have Toki now, and she is the one who made everybody believe in you again. So you owe a lot to that woman. He owes a lot to Toki anyway. But, Kinemon and the others are, like, scolding Oden and everything. And then also with that, they also explain to Oden what's been going on with Orochi. And with abusing his position as Shogun. And then, of course, when the retainers had tried to go to the Flower Capital to confront Orochi, which, of course, then resulted in a Beast Pirate group going and threatening Oden's family and all of that stuff. So there's so much that happens there. And, of course, this is, of course, what leads into when Oden, once he's been informed about everything that's been going on and about, Toki being injured and everything during one of the attacks, and he runs to the capital and, is preparing to face down Orochi. What ends up happening, of course, is this is when Orochi is like, makes the deal with him. Oh, if you dance naked in the street once a week for the next 5 years or whatever it ends up being, then I won't have citizens gathered up from Wano and taken to Onigashima to be used for, like, sacrifices or whatever. And, of course, Oden makes that deal, but he tells no one about it. He doesn't tell the Scabbards. He doesn't tell Toki. He doesn't tell anyone. And, of course, Kinemon and the others are watching as Oden dances naked in the Flower Capital, and they are ashamed, but they're also like, he has to be doing this for a reason, and they can never figure out what it is. And then, of course, this leads up to 20 years ago when everything comes to a head. And, of course, this is when Oden finally decides that he has had enough. This is just after Hirogoro has been captured, and Hirogoro's wife and several of his other subordinates have been killed. And this is this is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And Oden has had enough, and he is ready to take down Kaido. And the retainers are, of course, willing to follow him into this. And Oden and the retainers march to Onigashima, and this is, of course, a moment when they are referred to as the 9 Red Scabbards, because they all have their weapons. And, Oden leads them to Onigashima, and they are ready to face down Kaido and his forces. They don't quite make it to Onigashima. They have the battle on the way there instead, because, of course, we find out later that, Kanjuro is a traitor, and he sent information to Orochi so Kaido and his men could meet them in the middle and everything, meet them on the way there so as to not destroy his new home. So this is where they have the big battle that happens between Kaido and Oden, and then the Scabbards versus Kaido's forces at that point in time. And of course, this is also when Shinobu joins the Scabbards as well. And all of that stuff. And, I don't remember who Kinemon ends up fighting in this. during the battle. I don't think it's ever really quite specified. But, like, at that point in time, like, we know that King and Queen were on the crew at that point in time. King had been there for a while. Queen was very new to the crew at that point in time, given information we got a lot more recently with SBS stuff, and Viva card stuff for Queen. But we weren't very, we don't know of any other hard hitters that were part of, Kaido's crew at that point in time. Not that they were anything to sneeze about when you have, Queen and King there, even 20 years ago, they were still very strong and everything, and of course having Kaido there and everything. So I don't think we know who, like, Kinemon ends up fighting, but I would assume he takes care of a bunch of, like, the weaker forces and everything, along with the rest of the Scabbards, while Odin is fighting Kaido, and then, of course, this results in, of course, Odin being tricked, and then this results in, of course, all of the Scabbards and Odin being imprisoned in the Flower Capital and sentenced to be boiled alive in 3 days. And that is what that leads into, which of course then leads to all 10 prisoners being brought to the execution site. Odin goes in first, grabs the plank and has it balanced on his shoulders, and he keeps it there for an hour with the agreement from Kaido that should he and the retainers, who are all technically in the pot of boiling oil, if they stay there for an hour, they have taken their sentence. They have taken their punishment. And Kaido agrees to this. And this is when Odin is enduring this hour, the hour of legend. And the Scabbards are on top of it, and they're begging Odin to stop, to let them be in there with him, so he's not having to suffer by holding them up and everything, and protect them and everything. And they're all just begging him to stop. And during all of this is happening, it's revealed because of Shinobu that why Odin made the deal with Orochi in the first place, why he was dancing naked in the Flower Capital and everything every week for 5 years. And this, turns the tides and has all of the citizens in Wano now supporting Odin and supporting him and everything, and supporting the Scabbards again and the Kozuki family, and has like reignited that faith in that family, which of course Orochi despises. He gets ready to shoot Odin right at the end of the hour. Odin tosses the plank into the air, which results in all of the Scabbards jumping down and running, and they're all running their way toward Curry. During this time frame, they all get split up a bit. Shinobu manages to catch up with a good chunk of them, and she is able to use the key to get them out of their cuffs. Actually, I don't think it's ever confirmed if they were using sea stone cuffs, although given the fact that it is Wano and several of them do have devil fruit powers, although I don't know how much that was a completely known fact at that point in time, how much that was a known fact in regard to all of the different Scabbards, for which ones would have had powers and which ones wouldn't have. But I would assume some people would have figured it out. They would have just done it out of precaution or something like that, just given how terrified of Odin and the Scabbards Orochi was. That would make sense. And what ends up happening is, Shinobu gives them their weapons and gets them out of the cuffs, and then they all, a bunch of them are heading on their way to Odin Castle in the Curry region. And of course, this is when they all get split up. Inarashi and Nekomamushi get captured by the Shogun's forces. Denjiro and Ashura split off to fight a group of their enemies and everything. So they get all separated. And then, of course, this resulted, once they get to Curry Castle, or Odin Castle, it is on fire. And the ones that are remaining there are, of course, Kinemon, Kanjuro, Raizo, Kikuno, and Kiku. And they arrive there, and they make their way inside. They find out that Kaido has already been there, that he, threatened Momonosuke. We find Toki there along with Momonosuke and Hiyori, and Toki then explains to the Scabbards what she is going to do. She's like, I am going to use my powers to send... Kawamatsu is, of course, also there as well. Send all of you into the future, 20 years into the future. Because, of course, Toki has read Odin's journal, and she has an idea of what's going on and everything. And she's like, I'm going to send all of you into the future, and then Hiyori is going to stay here in the present with Kawamatsu and will grow up in the present, and then Momonosuke will be sent to the future. And you will have to go and find allies who can help us defeat Kaido. And she explains this to them, and, you know, they're like, well, we have to do this. We have to at least try this. And she uses her powers to send them into the future. So there's kind of two things to finish up here. First, before they arrive in the future, there's that whole 20-year time skip. Or that time jump there for their jumping into the future. But of course, Wano at that point in time is now left with the fact that a bunch of the Scabbards seem to have died, gone missing. They believe that Toki and the children are dead, and of course Oden and everything. And there are these graves that are erected at the site of Curry Castle, at Oden Castle in the Curry region. There are graves that are erected there for each of them, for the Scabbards and for the, Kozuki family that had been lost that day, because of course Orochi isn't going to allow them to have a proper funeral, proper shrine built for them, proper anything. He's not going to allow that. So the citizens do it themselves. And they're, of course, become like ghost stories. And of course, Brenda's doing funny noises. Brenda, are you okay, boo? You're a good girl. Yes, you are. I'm almost done. And what ends up happening is, of course, the 9 red Scabbards and the Kozuki, they become like ghosts. And of course, for the next 20 years, Orochi is haunted by this idea and haunted by Toki's prophecy. And of course, they then use propaganda and, of course, the lies in the history books to now try to teach the younger children, the younger generations and everything, that no, the Kozukis were not bad. Orochi was bad. Or flip that, sorry, that Orochi was actually the hero, and that the Kozukis were horrible and awful and everything. And we see that when we see Sarahebi teaching the children in Wano, in the flower capital. And then, of course, now that's having to be, like, deprogrammed out of them now that the Kozuki family is back in power where they should be. And Wano is free again. So we have this where, like, all of that is what's going on. And by the time Kinemon and the group that got sent forward arrive back in Wano, 20 years later, about 6 months before the present or so, 6.5, 7 months-ish before the present, what ends up happening is, of course, they land there, and they are greeted by, first of all, Momonosuke kind of has a mental breakdown, which is fair. He's 8 years old. His father just died. He just got sent into the future by his mother, who then ends up dying, and he doesn't know that, and he has no idea if his sister is still alive. And so it's just like, I completely understand why Momonosuke has like a bit of a mental breakdown. That is understandable, and will be discussed later when I eventually talk about Momonosuke, but that mental breakdown is completely understandable. But what ends up happening is they end up finding that there are these allies there that are still these loyalists to the Kozuki family. And this is, of course, where they find out about, like, the crescent moon that's on people's ankles and everything. That this is, like, a representation that they are secretly, loyal to the Kozuki family, because, like, Kozuki has moon in the kanji, and that's a recognition of that. And Kinemon and his group meet these ones, and they explain what's going on, and then they kind of get this rough idea as to what's going on. And then, of course, Kinemon tells Momonosuke that, okay, so for the time being, you are going to have to pretend that I am your father, and I'm going to have to pretend that you are my son. And they put on this ruse, and they practice and everything, so Kinemon and Momonosuke have that as a reflex to talk about each other as father and son. And of course, I am quite sure that Kinemon had a bit of a conversation with Momonosuke where it's just like, I am not trying to replace Oden. This is for your own safety. You have to pretend to be my son for your own safety for the time being. And Momonosuke is smart enough to understand that. So that then leads into when they then eventually have to leave Wano, because now they have to go and they have to get their allies. So they're like, okay, well, let's see about, we need to make our way to Zoe. I don't think it's ever explained how they make their way to Zoe. I think they just somehow are able to, because we know that they end up at Zoe and they get separated from Raizo on the way there. But I'll be going into that more with the next section, because the next section is about, Kinemon when he is outside of Wano, for everything that happens outside of Wano. So, as they are leaving Wano, they are spotted by the Beast Pirates, but they do manage to semi-evade them for a little bit. But of course, that is Kinemon, Momonosuke, Raizo, and Kanjuro, who all leave Wano at that point in time. Kiku, of course, stays and ends up being, kind of a little bit of like an intel gathering officer, which she ends up being very good at, which I'll go over when I get to Kiku later on. She's very good at that. But so Kinemon and the others have to now leave Wano to go and find their allies, to find the Minks, and then eventually to find other allies who will help them, which of course we know results in the Straw Hats and the Heart Pirates and everything. But that'll be the next discussion for this one. So that's what I have for this. I thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. And Happy New Year. I really freaking hope this one goes better than the last one. But we'll just have to wait and see. Bye.